I think I'm starting to understand how we conceptualize what something is. Um, I once got into a talk with a physicist. He was talking about particle physics, and I didn't understand much of what he was talking about. But one idea that he told me was, look, if you want to figure out if something has the property of being magnetic, what you obviously do is you put it into a magnetic field, and you watch and observe for how it behaves. So whether it's responding to the magnetic field, right? Same thing in biology. If you want to figure out whether certain cells or certain organisms are responsive to sound, you expose them to sound. And if they are responding to sound, being responsive to sound is one of their features. It's what they are to you now. They're not only something that is visual, that has a visual boundary and has certain elements that are internal to it and observable through the microscope. Not only is it visible, but you have exposed the whatever you're given to different environmental stimuli. And all of those then become a part of what your definition of that thing is. That thing is then responsive to sound. And this is how we generally seem to be conceptualizing the is-ness of whatever is given to us by exposing it to different situations that to us seem relevant. So the is-ness of what is given is, in this case, always dependent on what we can come up with as being possibly relevant and as being something that we could possibly expose the organism or the object to. So before exposing the organism, for example, to radioactive, for example, radiation, you wouldn't really know how it would look, how it would actually behave when exposed to radiation. So you would have to do the experiment. And you would have to come up with the idea of exposing it. You would have to come up with the idea of radiation in the first place and then to expose it to it. So if you've not come up with a situational context in which to expose the organism or object to, you would not know how it would respond. You would not know, it would not be a part of its isness for you how this specific object or subject would behave in that given situation. And then, of course, comes the subject notion here that I just mentioned on the side. In all these cases, you would never come to conclude that what is given to you, and what is given to you might be a dog, you would never come to the conclusion that thing that is given to me has experience, has interiority, has its own way of perceiving reality, has its own felt sense of being, of existing, has its own striving, its own appetite. None of those terms you could ever come up with as a result of doing something to the organism or doing something to the object that would force you to conclude that the organism must have, necessarily, must have some form of experience. Because the notion of experience is something that you interpret into the organism. It's something that you deduce from your own experience of being there, of being present, and from knowledge about yourself, from knowledge about how you feel of being in the world. But none of that can you deduce immediately from things that you do to the object or the organism. All you can do is, in a very anthropomorphic way, assume that if we have the same brains, we might have certain similar emotions on a certain level. We have certain basic experiences that you might be sharing. So we might be sharing a world space with the organism based on similar physiology. Um, but whether and how much of that overlaps, I mean, if you look at certain organisms, they look super different from us. They look super weird, even though they have eyes. But the creatures living deep down in the sea, for example, they look mightily weird. And their experience of being there, I guess, is very, very different from ours, even though we would assume there is something it's like to be these organisms. But again, none of those things, none of those first person characteristics, you would ascribe to any of these organisms, any of these experimental objects, if you want, from just putting them into different situations and going through a checkbox list and checking whether they're responsive to certain stimuli. What usually defines, again, the isness of a phenomenon. The isness of a phenomenon usually is defined by how it shows itself, how it appears in different situational contexts. In the different situational contexts before, where, for example, you expose them to a magnetic field or you expose them to sound and look how they behave. But I mean, there is nothing magic about this. I think isness for us is precisely that. And even in our everyday term, when we ask what is something, when we ask about the isness of anything, might be an animal, might be an object, might be an abstract phenomenon, what we usually want to know is how does it appear, how does it show itself in different contexts that are relevant to us. So we don't really care about all the possible contexts, but even when you ask about an animal, what you usually want to know about the animal is how would that animal behave if I was to face it from a close distance, right? This is what we usually want to know when we ask, what is this? And you're looking at a new form of animal. Is it dangerous or is it not? And this is usually enough for you to basically think that you have grasped the essence of the animal. Even though you might have no understanding whatsoever what this animal would do in gazillions of other possible contexts, you wouldn't care because you care about mostly one context in life, which is relevant for you. So it's funny how something that's on the one hand useful for us in our everyday existence, the isness, and without isness we wouldn't get anywhere. We want to understand the essence in this sense of things, to be able to cope. Even when somebody shows you a symbol, what you want to know is, what does this symbol do in certain contexts? And once you figure that out, you don't need to know more than that. That's all you need. And you have grasped the essence, right? This mysterious thing, the essence of something, is actually something that's in a way simple. And it's something that the moment you try to over intellectualize it and to go too deep, you lose. The moment you dig too deep and try to figure it out in too many details, you lose its essence. So that's funny how it works. It kind of works by being kind of fuzzy and if you want, stupid, in most areas of human life. And it's a necessary concept. Without the concept of isness, we would basically not know what we're facing. We would not be able to place what we're facing at all.